And we are back. So we are going to start off. So these are the worst wrestling gimmicks in the history of professional wrestling, at least from our opinions. Yes. I chose a lot of religious-based ones because those ones also were kind of the funniest.
Right. And also, if we did like all of them, we would be here for an hour. So we chose like 5. So, Peanut Gallery, go ahead.
Okay. So, Friar Ferguson, one-hit wonder because Friar Ferguson actually only wrestled one match as Friar Ferguson. So, he was the Mad Monk, and the WWF had received at the time negative. This was in 1993, which is a very well-known period, by the way, for I guess for that whole era. It was rife with those really bad gimmicks, if you can remember that. But so the Friar was a Mad Monk, and so what happened was they called it off after one match because the WWF received negative feedback from the Catholic Church in New York. So, if you don't know a lot about the actual person, Mike Shaw, I think was his name, the WWF, and even WCW and stuff, all of his personas, all of his gimmicks were really centered around his weight, the way that he looked. And so that's kind of, again, that's really old style of looking at things, but that's really kind of where he gained his fame from, was the way that he looked. And of course there are plenty of characters who have that, but that's, to me, that's something that might be more of an older style.
Right. This was the gimmick before he became Bastion Booger.
Right, so Bastion Booger as well. But again, Bastion Booger was also based off of the way that he looked.
Right.
And then even I think it was his son, wasn't his son Big Dick Johnson?
Something like that.
Yeah. So again, it was because of the way that he looked that was, that really kind of put him into those gimmicks. So anyways, Friar Ferguson's one and only match was against a jobber named Chris Duffy. It was completely unremarkable in every way. Shaw looked like what he was, a bald old man with wobbly knees, and Vince can't have been impressed. But yeah, the Catholic Church in New York certainly wasn't impressed, and they complained about the character, forcing it to be removed from television. So that's the short history of Friar Ferguson, and we're going to move on here to our next, Papa Shango. Papa Shango, people in the Attitude Era might know him as Papa Shango, but also his probably arguably more well-known gimmick of The Godfather,
right?
And various others. But in 1992, he came and he was packaged as Papa Shango. I think that there was an injury that happened in early 1991, so he was out for a while, and then he came back. But he was a voodoo practitioner with an appearance reminiscent of the Iowa. And it was actually inspired by the character in Live and Let Die.
It's a great movie.
So the character debuted in February of 1992, defeating enhancement talent. The character carried a skull to the ring, billowing smoke, and could control arena lights, allowing for strange goings-on in the ring, and later could cast spells to cause apparent pain and to make them vomit from afar. So what really kind of thrust him into the spotlight was he ran in on a Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice main event match at WrestleMania 8.
Oh, no.
And Shango actually missed his cue to run in, hitting the ring late. The finish was supposed to be Sid getting disqualified because of Shango breaking up the pinfall attempt by Hogan after he hit the big drop. However, due to Shango getting the ring late, Sid was forced to kick out of the leg drop to save the angle. Sid's manager, Harley Whippleman, then jumped in on the apron. The referee signaled for the disqualification. At that point, as Shango was just getting to the ring, the Ultimate Warrior then returned to the WWF by running to the ring and helping Hogan against Sid and Shango. After WrestleMania, Sid and Warrior were scheduled to begin the feud. However, Sid had previously failed a drug test, and that is when Shango was going to feud with Sid instead. However, the angle just went nowhere. So
no, Shango feuded with Warrior. You mean?
Oh no, yeah, Shango feuded with Warrior. Sorry, instead of Sid,
right?
Where he would cast voodoo spells on his opponent. However, that angle went nowhere, and the Warrior went and challenged Randy Savage for the World Heavyweight Champion at SummerSlam. So Shango then defeated Tito Santana at the dark match for that event at SummerSlam, and Shango finally had a match with the Warrior in November of 1992, and then Warrior was released. However, Shango would get a main event spot at the championship. Didn't win, but so what happened essentially was at the Royal Rumble, Papa Shango, which was following the following year, he just kind of fell off the face of the earth after that Royal Rumble, and that's about it. I mean, Papa Shango was just people didn't like the gimmick because it was too, I guess, cartoony. The curses were seen as an embarrassment. And you got to think about the time, too. I mean, that was just the time. But again, it probably is going down in history as one of the worst gimmicks in WWF history after, of course, Gobbledygooker.
which I'm going to talk about.
He's going to talk about.
So, fun fact, what's his name? I can't remember his name. But Papa Shango, whoever portrayed him, I can't remember his name. I don't know why it lost me. But he actually studied voodoo rituals.
Yes.
To get himself into the character.
Right.
So a lot of those rituals that he did and a lot of those powers actually are based on voodoo rituals.
Right.
Which I think is cool because he's like, let me make this, let me get the best out of the bad situation right now.
Right.
So
anyways, moving on here, we're going to go pretty quickly here. The Flying Nuns.
Oh, God.
So the Flying Nuns, Sister Angelica and Mother Smucker, better known to us as Mosh and Thrasher, the Headbangers. So this was a Headbangers introduction into the WWF. Of course, it was a one-hit wonder. Only wrestled one match as the Flying Nuns. And it was the gimmick was all part of an elaborate angle to introduce the Bangers to the WWF audiences, but it was dropped pretty quickly, likely owing to how touchy some Christians have a tendency to be about those things,
especially at that time too.
Yeah, and so they changed their gimmick a little bit. They changed it to, I believe, the Angels or something like I'm looking, sorry. But anyways, they were hailing from a monastery in the Himalayas. They changed their gimmick a little bit to the Sisters of Love, but that gimmick, too, was short-lived, and they actually kept the skirts when they returned to being the Headbangers in January of 1997.
That's interesting.
Yep, the Flying Nuns.
Sister Angelica and Mother Smucker.
Yep.
Like, for God's sake.
Let's talk about Lowdown now. It was a tag team that consisted of Chaz, formerly known as Masha the Headbangers, and as Beaver Cleavage and D'Lo Brown. The team was named after D'Lo Brown's finishing move having been called Low Down. So Chaz and D'Lo Brown, they were renamed because reasons.
Because D'Lo Brown's finisher move was called the Lowdown.
But again, they had a short-lived rivalry with Team Extreme, and they actually aligned themselves with Tiger Al Singh. So that's when they picked up the gimmick of being Sikh wrestlers, having been held down. So the ring attire would incorporate turbans and sashes, and then they were given Tiger's entrance music as well. But of course, the popularity rapidly dwindled.
And probably there were some people who were unhappy with it.
Yes, but that was kind of a whatever that gimmick was called. It was kind of stupid. Now let's actually go to one that actually could have been a very big success, Mordica. So Mordica, for all of those who may not know because they're too young, he was also Kevin Thorne. back when he
and they still might,
re-debuted
and they
in
still might
ECW.
be too young.
And they still might be too young. But Mordica was actually based off of a character they had in the indie scene called Seven, based on the 7 deadly sins.
Yes.
So after his stint in the independent scene, he actually approached Vince McMahon about becoming the character that would later become Mordecai. And Vince was very impressed with the presentation, and actually The Undertaker too was very impressed. Mordecai and The Undertaker were actually supposed to have a match at WrestleMania 21.
Really? I thought it was...
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. You can scroll down a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I just, I'm not very good at this. So, anyways, it wasn't a stupid gimmick. It really didn't go anywhere. So the whole gimmick was he was trying to, eradicate the sins of WWE.
So he wore all white,
Right.
and he had used a crucifix powerbomb. I remember watching him.
Right.
He was one of my favorite gimmicks.
Yes.
I loved Mordecai.
Right. So, anyways, that's kind of where that whole gimmick went. I think the problem was, though, that it just wasn't executed very well. And so, can you scroll up just a little bit?
Sorry.
Anyways, that kind of was Mordecai's whole thing. He's just, condemned the audience for their sins, led them in prayer, and he was actually sent back to OVW pretty quickly to do some more training. There was also some reason to believe that he was involved in the bar fight, and there was impending lawsuits meant that WWE decided to take him off of television.
Yes.
So that's kind of what happened to Mordecai. But yeah, Mordecai would have been he would have been the person that would face The Undertaker at WrestleMania 21.
That's
kind of cool. But that's kind of where that went. But, they want to do that whole, good versus evil kind of thing. Mordecai in all the white versus Undertaker in all black.
Right.
That sort of
I
thing.
thought it would have been great, and he looked I remember he looked very impressive.
He did, yes.
I thought he was fairly good. I just don't know why it didn't catch. I think maybe part of it is, it wasn't, there wasn't really anything, wow factor other than the entrance. It's maybe him beating up a couple of guys and really, being taken seriously as that threat. That would have put him over the top.
Right.
Have him go after The Undertaker.
Right.
That's what would have put him over.
Right. So that's kind of where that went. So we're going to talk about our last person, and I don't even want to call it a person, but it was probably more like a Vince McMahon jerk-off sesh.
We had to do this because I think this was probably, of all the dumb religious gimmicks that they had, this one was the most offensive.
Yes, and we're going to talk about God, which was the invisible beam of light that teamed up with Shawn Michaels against Vince and Shane McMahon.
And now this is after Shawn Michaels' injury, so at this point
Right.
he was born again.
He was born again, and Vince McMahon wanted to take it into some storyline. So Vince and his son Shane were concocting this whole plan. They were I guess they were kind of making fun of, or at least they were criticizing Michaels for his faith in God.
Yes.
And so
They went to a church.
yeah, they went to a church and they did all sorts of crap. So anyways, let's get to the match itself. So it was a handicap match originally. It was Shawn Michaels versus Vince and Shane McMahon. And so what happened was Vince actually had the entire arena go dark, and then have his beam of lights fall from the ceiling, met by it was accompanied by a chorus of angels, and it was just this beam of light that was just walking down. That was just going slowly down the ramp towards the ring. So literally, it was God.
Right.
And the referee had to do a pat down on God and everything. It was Shawn Michaels and his faith in God versus Vince and Shane McMahon. And that literally was the premise of the entire storyline. But the beam of it's not even a person. It's just Vince McMahon's gigantic cock in his ego said, "This is a good idea, guys."
Oh, people were actually very pissed off about this too.
Yep. So, what can we have? This is just joke. This is a joke and gifs, and it's did you ever really want this to be a thing? It's I wonder what God's finishing move would have been. But anyways, we're going to end off on that because you just got to love these horrible religious gimmicks. They should not do these anymore unless the person is actually... Now, there are actually some religious gimmicks that were done really well. Like Shawn Michaels is a great example of... Like, he actually has, like, faith in that religious gimmick, but he's actually incorporating it into his whole, like...
Right. It's Shawn Michaels.
Right.
It's Shawn Michaels. It's Shawn Michaels.
Right.
Michelle McCool used crosses
Right.
all over hers because she's very heavily religious.
Yeah, there are some religious gimmicks that work, but for every one religious gimmicks that work, there's probably 100 that don't.
Like, this is a good thing for people to
Right.
really do, other than, like demons are fine, I guess. I mean, I feel like if you do, like, there are religious gimmicks that do work, and I think you can
Right.
do one where somebody does pray before.
Right.
There's a way to do it respectfully. Obviously, WWE can't do that
Right.
because that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But there's a way to do it.
But anyway, so yeah, that was Vince McMahon stroking his ego and saying, "Oh my God, it's God! Oh,
Like grapefruits.
oh my grapefruits!"
So anyway.
Anyways, when we come back, we're
It's
gonna
mine.
end off with Tiger Heights.
Yeah. And we are back, and let's go to my choices.
Hooray.
We're going to start off with just a wonderful gimmick with Tony Atlas dressed up as a Ugandan warrior called Saba Simba. The gimmick was brought in to have a rivalry with, at that time, Akeem the African Dream, which was the white guy, but it never really happened for some weird reason.
Right.
He returned to the WWF in 1990, so that's when it debuted.
Okay.
After several battles with drugs,
Okay.
and then also he was homeless for 1.5 years before this. And this is Tony Atlas too,
Right.
A trailblazer for African Americans in professional wrestling, being one half of the first African American tag team champions.
Right.
The excuse that people gave of Tony Atlas being on there, because he didn't wear a mask or anything, it was
Right.
just basically Tony Atlas, was that he was proud of his heritage after taking a trip to Africa.
Okay.
So that is how they got that. The gimmick was immediately lambasted for being racist and stereotypical on message boards. This is early 1990s.
Yeah, it was a message board.
Right? And also, like, through magazines and stuff, like, writers would say that, like, the whole thing is terrible.
Right.
Atlas came out years after, despite the gimmick, thanking WWF for the opportunity, because not only did it save his life because of the drug testing, which forced him to clean himself up,
Right.
but also he was able to get a place.
Right.
So, that's good. I guess Tony Atlas actually also did like doing the gimmick as well. He gave some new life to it, and he only really had a handful of matches. He never won a title.
Right.
He was really more of a curtain jerker. He never really got out of beating up a bunch of jobbers and some
Right.
lower card. But at least with this gimmick, it really helped Tony Atlas,
Right.
and now he's fine. And I wish him all the best, but I'm not sure if you've ever seen what this guy wore, but it was really bad. But yes, let's go to the Yeti.
The Yeti.
Well, no, that's how Tony Schiavone pronounced it. The Yeti! The Yeti! It was given to Ron Reese, but it wasn't supposed to be him, actually. It was supposed to be given to Giant Gonzalez. But he had to leave due to physical problems. It might have been a bad thing that Gonzalez at this point was 8'2", and he was 39.
Yeah.
So obviously there was that. So Ron Reese was brought in and given that gimmick, and at the very end of the episode of Nitro before Halloween Havoc, you just can't get away from fucking Halloween Havoc.
I know, right?
He broke out from a glacier. I am not kidding you. And he waved his arms. He waved his arms, and the final thing is, "What is that?" And the thing cut out. So this was the Dungeon of Doom's insurance policy against Hogan, because the main event was the Giant, or Big Show, in his debut match against Hulk Hogan,
Right.
for the WCW World Champion. The Giant won the match by disqualification,
Right.
because the title could change hands via disqualification. So then the Yeti comes out, 7'2", Ron Reese, wrapped up like a mummy, and he is called the Yeti. So Big Show had Hulk Hogan in a bear hug, and the Yeti comes over to the back of Hogan and starts giving him a bear hug, but he did like a seizure, so this is why you don't do a double bear hug, because basically Hogan was raped.
Okay.
It was immediately criticized on, once again, message boards, because we're talking about 1995.
Right.
And magazines just hated it because it's like, you call it the Yeti, but it's a mummy against Dungeon of Doom, which is, at this point, the worst gimmick of 1995 as well. So they decided to change it.
Right.
Now, when you change it from the Yeti, you would think, oh, still 7'2", you can do something cool with it, and maybe it's like Ron the Yeti Reese because he's like a big dude, right? Whatever. No, let's put him in a ninja mask
and call him Super Giant Ninja.
Yes, but he did not. That name did not change until later. He was still called the Yeti.
Oh, Jesus.
But with the ninja mask.
Oh, God.
He wrestled a couple of matches, and then it was immediately dropped because it's stupid.
Right.
I love that gimmick. It's one of my favorite gimmicks. Also, the double bear hug because, butt rape. Anyway, from Peanut Gallery talking about a one-hit wonder gimmick to me talking about one.
Hooray!
Fantasio.
Yeah!
Who was a magician.
Yeah, magician.
This is early 90s WWF, so about the same time that Friar Ferguson was there.
And all the other stupid fucking gimmicks that we get.
The gimmick was given to Harry Del Rios because he was a amateur magician in real life.
Okay.
He had 3 matches. A dark match on Raw in 1993, the infamous match on Wrestling Challenge in 1995, and another dark match in 1997 as the Spellbinder.
Okay.
Which is actually the name of his gimmick in the indie scene at the time.
Jesus.
So I watched the match for study. Without the stupid magic tricks gimmick, he was actually a really good wrestler. Right. He looked physically good. His stuff was really clean and nice and really easy, except for the gimmick. Del Rios caught McMahon's eye very early on, and he was working in the USWA because they had a working agreement. Right. And then they called it, he was called up north. So a lot of people say that the USWA was actually the first developmental territory for WWF, and instead of calling up to the main roster, they said called up north.
Right.
Because I think
kind of like in WCW when they talked about like going north or whatever.
Right. Exactly. According to Del Rios in an interview in 2006, Mark Calloway was not a fan of the Fantasio gimmick and felt that it mirrored his Undertaker gimmick too closely. I'm going to 1,000,000% call bullshit on that because Undertaker is a Undertaker, not a magician.
Right.
Gigantic difference. Let's go to Glacier.
Hooray!
So,
obviously a Mortal Kombat Sub-Zero character.
Because this was 1996, and Mortal Kombat was like in the news constantly because of the violence. It was betrayed by Raymond M. Lloyd because Raymond has multiple martial arts disciplines, including a black belt in karate. He competed for the World Karate Association in full contact tournaments, eventually winning the United States Southeastern Super Heavyweight title.
Jesus.
He retired because they were going to be changing up the rules where kicks could not be higher than like the waist.
Right.
Because I guess there were a couple of deaths, and he did not like that, but he was also older. So at least they gave the Glacier gimmick to a guy who knew what he was doing.
Right.
The costume design was from Andre Fretis, which costed about $35,000.
Jesus.
The entrance, according to WCW producer Keith Mitchell, costed WCW $400,000 with an additional $10,000 bill for 3 technicians who had been flown in every time for the entrance routine in the display.
Right.
That's insane. This is a $500,000 gimmick.
Right.
And it didn't work. So Glacier did not click with WCW fans or the executives. Actually, he was popular with fans. Kids actually liked him.
Right.
Which is kind of weird, but I can get it. Also, he had blue light over the ring during his matches.
Oh, that's annoying.
So, very Sin Cara.
Yeah.
So his gimmick was changed to Coach Buzz Stern, and after an injury from Glacier, and then he was released, and he's doing fine now. I think he's like a lawyer. So Glacier, I love Glacier. It's one of my favorite gimmicks.
All right, last person,
but most certainly not least, an infamous gimmick, the Gobbledygooker.
Yeah.
McMahon was interested on signing Hector Guerrero to a contract, but McMahon did not know how small Guerrero was at the time.
Jesus.
Guerrero tried to make the case that a smaller gimmick couldn't draw money, but obviously he couldn't convince McMahon.
Right.
This was an idea to bring kids and families, the Gobbledygooker gimmick, as a Survivor Series mascot.
Right.
And Guerrero and WWF agents had issues, but Dusty Rhodes vouched for Hector to stay with the company and do the gimmick.
Right.
Hector has gone on record saying that the Gobbledygooker was a missed business opportunity. One could say, he says that it could have worked given the right venue.
Okay.
I can kind of agree with him, but maybe not wrestling.
Right.
So obviously there was the egg.
Right.
That Gobbledygooker came out on. They touted the egg around the circuit, including house shows, and there was a box underneath. That's where Hector Guerrero would be under.
Right.
He was given a monitor, he was given a light, and he was given like snacks and drinks. The crew that built it pranked him by pasting pornographic photos inside of the box on the screen, knowing that Hector Guerrero was a very heavily Catholic man, and he was super upset about it. The end of the gimmick came a month after in Madison Square Garden. The production thought it was a great idea to shine a bright light on the Gobbledygooker, but the eye holes were at the eyes, and the eyes were white globes.
Right.
So shines right in there. Guerrero was blind, so he almost ran into the stands. He hit his knees on the steel steps, and he flipped over the ropes, slipped, and landed on his butt because he couldn't see.
Right.
He couldn't see. It was dropped. Guerrero was fired, and that is the end of the Gobbledygooker. He agreed to come back as the character for WrestleMania 17 in the promotional battle royal.
Okay.
But people, I don't know. I think it's stupid. I think there would have been no way to save his gimmick no matter what.
Right.
And thank God that we don't have that other than Retribution.
Anyway, well, that's kind of the end of the show. What is going on next week? We have pay-per-views.
So we have the Survivor Series.
And then isn't there an NXT show as well, or is there not?
No, there is not. There is not, at least announced yet.
Okay, but yes, it will definitely be our friend over at Survivor Series. WWE is doing their stuff. The E.
Yes.
And
so because we are going to be in a different location.
Bible studies to be determined. Wrestling lesson with Tiger Height is to be determined.
Yes, it's definitely a to be determined for next week. But then the week after, we're going to be talking about not blundered gimmicks, but we're going to be talking about blundered promoter decisions. Like saying that Bruno Sammartino was going to be nothing but a mid-carder. So, I want to thank you all for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, remember to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're watching it, and share it with your friends. Become a patron. Follow us on social media, including Peanut Gallery's very neglected fucking Instagram.
Very neglected. It sucks.
And as always, be
majestic.